Okay, go ahead.
Anything that I say now is seen through the eyes of a nice young Jewish lad who grew up in Brooklyn, who led a relatively sheltered life, and then drafted into the Army after having just graduated college, drafted into the Army, the 104th Infantry Division, who walked from the English Channel D-Day invasion all the way to Berlin, 782 miles, in a little over 11 and a half months, never having slept in a bed during that period of time, and also always being hungry, cold, and dirty.
So I was going to ask, why did you join the Army, but you just told us that you were drafted?
I was drafted,
okay.
Yes.
And how old were you when you joined?
I was 21 and a half. I never joined. Join means you did it voluntarily. I didn't join.
When you were drafted?
I was drafted.
Gotcha. Were you one of the only Jewish American soldiers?
No, I was not. I was one of the few, but I was not the only.
And how did being Jewish affect you differently than the non-Jewish soldiers you were with?
It gave me a different perspective on life, and also knowing what was going on in Nazi Germany previously, I already was prejudiced against the Germans and against Adolf Hitler, of course. So being Jewish gave me a greater incentive to get through the war and get rid of and do away with Germany as it was constructed at that time.
So I know that you had a camera with you.
I had a what?
A camera with you? Did many others have a camera?
Well, this is a delicate term. When you say we had a camera with us, we used to say that we liberated a camera, meaning that as we hit some towns, and we would go into various homes and take a camera. We called it liberating it. So I did not carry a camera with me per se, but when we hit various towns, I managed to get my hands on a camera by, quote, stealing one.
What did the towns look like, and were they completely destroyed?
Some of the towns were not completely destroyed. Others were very well destroyed, depending upon how close to an industrial site they were. If they were in the rural areas and they were very little damage was done in the rural areas. But with any place that was industrialized or semi-industrialized, a good deal of it was completely destroyed. That was our game, is to destroy the Nazi war machine.
What was the scariest part of your time in the war?
The what?
The scariest part of time in war.
It depends upon what time you're looking at, what period of time you're looking at. Having been in the infantry and in the forward intelligence section, we were always under fire. So when I say under fire, it means that we were being shelled, either from the air or from the ground or landmines, so that we were always ready to take a shell somewhere or other. This, after a while, you became a little bit immune to it, but you were never completely at ease. And so you had to be relatively careful where you step, because you could be stepping on a landmine. And as a matter of fact, most of the injuries that were done to all the foot soldiers, all the infantrymen, were in the lower extremities, were caused by landmines rather than aerial bombing or machine gunning from the air, or cannon or rifle fire. So in the Veterans Administration, you'll find most of the people in the Veterans Administration hospitals, even to this day, all have lower injuries, lower extremities that were injured due to landmines.
What was the most memorable part of your journey?
The day I got on the Queen Mary to come home.
Why?
Well, the war was over, and as a matter of fact, for us, the war was never over, because when the Germans surrendered in May, I think, or June of May, or September of '45, we were slated. My unit was slated to go to the invasion of Japan. So we were, as we got on the boat, the Queen Mary, to go to Japan for the invasion of Japan, the Japanese surrendered. And as a result, the Queen Mary did not head out to the Far East, but headed into New York. That was my most memorable.
What emotions were you feeling when you got to the camp that you liberated?
When I got what?
What emotions were you feeling when you got to the camp that you liberated?
Well, we liberated many camps, and there were three different type of camps that we actually encountered. One was a labor camp where the people they were forced to do manual labor, and actually the manual labor was manufacturing anything that would be useful in the war effort. And you probably have seen pictures of people sleeping in bunks 3, 4, 5 high, and when they got off the bed, if they could ever get off the bed, they were walking skeletons. Their heads were very, very much enlarged. Their stomachs protruded. Their arms and legs were spindles. And they could barely speak. These are the people who did the labor, who did the forced labor. There were other camps where people were actually cremated, or we saw those. And there was a third type of camp, which was unbelievable, where the doctors were doing experiments on live people without anesthesia. You can't believe the sounds and the noises that came out, and the grotesque figures that they ended up with. It was unbelievable. But no matter whether you went to any one of the three camps, it was revolting. You couldn't believe that man could be so inhumane to man. It was a revolting sight. And amongst other things, the crematoriums where they were burning people alive, you could smell burning flesh. Has the worst odor you could possibly imagine. You could smell it 5 miles away, and when we would get the odor, and we knew we were coming up to an area where they were burning people. Tough soldiers who had been through hell already would cry, and the odor was so revolting that the people would be throwing up. And here we were, tough guys who had been really tough and had been exposed to everything you can imagine, were crying and regurgitating or throwing up. It was an unbelievable sight, which you never could get accustomed to, and you can never imagine.
So did you liberate all three types of camps, or was there one in particular that
No,
you were at?
we were, well, as we came through various areas, and if we came upon these particular camps, obviously we liberated them. And I could say one other thing. Those that were barely alive in the labor camps, we would see these people who would be begging for a morsel, and we would give them some of our K rations, which were rations in a cardboard box, and these people would eat it, devour it, including the box practically, and then throw up because they couldn't take the food. And pretty soon, when the medical people came through, they prohibited us from feeding anybody because it was, rather than helping them, it was killing them. And so the medical people had to bring in all sorts of liquids to infuse into their bodies to give them some bit of strength, and to so that they wouldn't have to eat whole food which they couldn't digest. Their bodies were so weakened. It was uh, it was, in plain English, it was holy hell.
So you personally, what emotions were going through you? What was your personal experience with emotions?
My personal experience was, obviously, having been a pre-med student and looking at bodies from what I had seen previously to see what I now saw, just was revolting. I couldn't imagine it. I just couldn't imagine it, and I couldn't believe that people could be so cruel. And eventually I had to accept it, because there I was. I couldn't go anyplace else, and I had to march forward and keep going forward. And so I had to learn to live with it. I could never accept it, but I had to live with it as long as I was alive and kicking on my own. In addition to which, I had a job being a forward observer in the intelligence section. My job was to make sure that the troops coming behind us, we were the leaders, and the troops coming behind us didn't have to go through what we went through, because we were the first shock troops in that area. And you had a job to do, and we did it as best we could. And I tried my damnedest. I'll leave that part of it out, but I tried to be as humane and sensitive as possible.
So when you got there, was there anything memorable that the prisoners were doing?
You know what? The prisoners that were in the labor camps, they were working 10, 12 hours a day. They were just skin and bone. How they ever lived as long as they did always amazed me. But the human will was still there, and they got to the point where they could say in a dozen different languages, which we were picking up. They would be saying thank you, or dankeschön, or bitteschön, or dziękuję, in various other languages, Polish and German and Yiddish. They were so thankful that we came along, and they hopefully that they would get to live another day.
Were there children there? Did you see children?
We didn't see. I didn't see any young children. No, I don't think I saw anybody less than maybe 18 or 19 years of age. I didn't see any young children at all. No, I don't know where they were, but I didn't see them.
And were men and women separated?
Theoretically, they were separated. There were, yes, the men were in one side and women were in another side. Their sanitary facilities were co-ed. the little sanitary facilities that they had were co-ed, so which means that there was no such thing as a shower. There was a sponging area, and we did see what looked like men and women co-mingling in the sponging area where they could sponge themselves down a bit. But I didn't see anything that looked like a shower or a tub or bathtub or anything of that nature. So apparently sanitary facilities were totally lacking as far as we could see.
Did the camps seem better, worse, or the same as what you had imagined them to be?
They were far worse than I could possibly have imagined. I couldn't conjure up people living in those conditions and the way they kept them, under what control that they kept them, and how they kept them working to the point where they would be dropping at their workstations. They would just drop and fall off, and people would step over them and just keep going. So it was far worse than anything I could imagine or dream up.
Prior to arriving at the camp, did you believe what you were hearing about them?
Yes, I did. I did, because I've heard stories prior to that, and various organizations, Jewish organizations, had been writing about that, and we got all sorts of literature. We were getting all sorts of literature from various organizations telling us what was going on in Nazi Germany. So I was fully prepared to see what I saw, except that I saw a hell of a lot worse than I could have possibly imagined.
Did you speak to any Germans who weren't prisoners, and did they claim to not know that anything was going on?
Very funny, yes. I did, between my Yiddish and some little bit of German that I knew, I was also interrogating prisoners. And so I got a chance to speak with the civilian population, not only the German prisoners of war, soldiers, but even the general population, because that was part of our job, is to find out what kind of armaments were in the area. And what was the part of that question? I forgot.
Did they claim to not know anything was going on?
And it was very surprising that they all did not know what was going on next door. Now, as I said heretofore, the odor of burning flesh, you cannot miss it. It's impossible. You could smell it 5 miles away. And these people said that they didn't know what was going on. Obviously, it was a total fabrication. The labor camps, they had to know what was going on because the ambulances and the hearses were coming through the barracks that these people were living in, those dormitories that they were living in. They were running day and night, dragging out the people who were just keeling over, who were dying. So it was impossible that they didn't know what was going on. And yet they kept on admitting with a straight face, oh, they didn't know what was going on. And when I questioned them, well, what are you missing? Well, the only thing we're missing is matches, gasoline, and soap. The matches and the gasoline I can understand. The soap, I had to figure out why they talked about soap. The Germans as a nation were very, very clean. The streets were brushed down. Even during the war, they would be out cleaning the streets, not only the front of their houses, but cleaning the streets. So they were a very, very clean nation. I mean, it must have been a beautiful country before it was messed up. but they claimed that they were missing soap, and because they couldn't clean what they had to clean. I have a funny story about soap. Uh, as I said, we didn't have any facilities as GIs walking through the areas and being on the road for almost 11 and a half months from D-Day until the day the Germans surrendered, which is about 11 and a half months. We didn't have any clean clothes practically, and so when we hit a town and we knew we were going to be there for a short while, I would gather up all my clothes and some of my friends' clothes and take them into anybody's home and say, "Here, wash our clothes." And they would do it gladly, but they said, "Give me soap. We don't have any soap." So somehow or other, I was able to commandeer soap through the Army supply train. I was able to commandeer soap, and when I gave them people the soap, they would do our laundry. And then a couple hours later, as we were walking by in the streets or so, they would call out through the window, "Herr Ehrlich, the Wäsche is fertig." Mr. Ehrlich, your laundry is ready. And we would pick up so we get clean laundry. that was one of the little side things that we were able to do.
Did you see any piles of clothing and other possessions of people who did not survive, and what impact did that have on you?
I don't know that was I don't know that really ever made any impression at all, because the clothes were clothes. It was all raggedy tagged clothes that they wore anyhow, so it didn't make any difference to us whether it was beat up, 50% beat up or 90% beat up. It was still just a ragtag clothes, tattered clothes. It didn't make any impression one way or another. That was something that didn't register. But I will say one thing: when I went into some of the German homes, and I would look around at the German homes, and I would see clothes that was made in France, or clothes that were made in Milan, Italy, in some of the fashion centers of Europe. I would say to them, "Where did you get this clothes from?" "Oh, we bought it." "Oh, sure, you bought it. You stole it. It was liberated. Just like I'm liberating your camera. That's how you got these clothes." And so I was able to do a little getting even, so to speak. Sometimes it was a funny transaction, but sometimes you did what you had to do.
How do you feel about Germans and Germany today?
Well, I can say one thing, that my parents, my father was born in the United States. My mother was born in Latvia, and she came here when she was 4 years old. But my father's family, and from the last name Ehrlich, or Ehrlich, as it's pronounced in Germany, which means honest or integrity in German, my father's family actually were the high-ranking Germans. They were Prussians. Prussia was a part of Germany at the time that had all the landed gentry lived were Prussians, and they were also military officers. So it's hard to say what my feelings were toward the Germans, because my father's family were very, very decent and upright people. And as I said, my dad was born in Brooklyn himself. Uh, but as far as the militant Germans, I had no use for them. I still have no use for them. And those who were members of the Nazi Party and who were stormtroopers, I still think that the best German is a dead German.
How does it make you feel that there are people who deny the Holocaust?
What?
How does it make you feel that some people deny that the Holocaust happened when you saw it with your own eyes?
Well, I take into consideration who the people are who deny the deniers. I know that while I was walking through Europe, taking a cook's tour of Europe and France, Belgium, Holland, and into Germany, I sent some things home to my parents, and which got through the censors. And there were people who my parents showed these items to or pictures to, and they were deniers. Those are the people who we never considered friends, thank goodness, and we never considered them as our peers. They were always, and I hate to use the expression, but they were a different class. And so I can't, I just can't fathom the fact that they were able to deny what I was able to see with my own two eyes. I guess, people are people, and that's what we have to put up with.
How did your experience affect you post-war?
Post-war?
Yes. How did what you experienced affect you and continue to affect
you?
you?
Very, 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 very fortunately, I was very lucky. Somebody was looking out for me. But I was able to come through the war, come home, go back to college. So I am still, at 98 and a half years old, I'm still mentally, morally, and mostly physically untouched by the rigors of war. I came through in one piece, so to speak, and this is my story. That I was very fortunate. Somebody was looking out for me, and that's my story.
Do you have anything else you want to add, or that's it?
I wrote something down here. Oh, at many of the labor camps, they had signs up, big signs in front of the entrance to the factories. The labor camps and the factories were almost interchangeable, and they used to have a big sign in front of the labor camps. Arbeit macht das Leben süß. And translated, that means work makes your life sweet. And me, who likes to play with words, I changed it a little bit, and I made a change on it. Arbeit macht das Leben mies. And all I changed was one word at the end, where I said Arbeit macht das Leben süß, and I said mies. And that translated means work makes your life miserable. I tried to change the last word in each sentence. I'd like to change from sweet to miserable, and in German is Zees and Mies. I don't think you'll be able to get that down. But it was a play on words, and sometimes I had one heck of a job getting them to change the sign, and many a time I would end up changing the sign myself, with the help of a couple of other GIs, obviously. I don't know what else. What else we can say? It was actually the period I was in service for about 3.5 years in total, from the time I was drafted till the time I was discharged. But actual combat, actual combat, and actual time in Germany was about 11 and a half, 12 months, give or take. But that was total combat, and I mean combat, 24 hours a day. We couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep, we couldn't do anything without some German plane flying overhead and dropping a couple of bombs or letting go a couple of machine gun bursts just to keep us awake and running. So it was, you had to be young in order to be able to get through it. And luckily, I was, as I said, I had a couple of pieces of shrapnel, which would never put me out of commission. I was able to pick out some shrapnel out of my legs myself and bandage it up. But other than that, I was extremely fortunate. I came through, as I say, mentally, morally, and physically in good shape. I didn't have any of the problems when a lot of the GIs came back. They had all sorts of problems. I fortunately never encountered them, and even to the point where having nightmares. Some fellows have nightmares. I didn't have any nightmares. I was able to control myself and to control my attitude. So that was my story.
Can you tell the story, if you remember, of when someone, I think it was on a train, somebody came up to you and said that you saved their life? Do you know this?
That I could what?
That you saved their life. I think it was on a train.
Oh, it's on a subway.
Yeah. Can you tell the story? It's okay if you can't.
Yeah, I probably, if I thought about it, I probably could tell the story. That was a story. I was on a subway in New York, and some young fellow about my age came up to me and said, "Were you in the 104th Infantry Division?" I said, "Yes." "Were you in Germany?" "Yes." Did you were you sometimes practicing a little medicine here and there? And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you saved my life." And he told me who he was. He happened to be the son of a famous baker rather, the Lovernoy Bakeries or something similar to that. And he was the son of this famous bakery owner. And he told me where it was, which I don't recall now at all. There were so many places that we went through that I just don't recall the names. And that he was bleeding, and I stopped, and I put a tourniquet around him, around his leg, and gave him some water, and then bandaged him up a little bit, because we all carried some medical supplies, like sulfur at the time when sulfur came out, which was a like what they call, uh, well, to prevent infections. And you saved my life because later on, when you left, there's some you called some medic over to finish off the job, and here I am. So that was it.
How does talking about this make you feel right now?
You know, I'm living in a retirement village, and we have a writers group. And just the other day, I wrote. They asked us to write something uh, about some memories, and I wrote a 4 or 5 page story of of um, of arriving at Swansea, Wales, on a ship, and then being in the invasion of of uh, the Normandy coast. I wrote that. I just wrote it just the other day. I can give you a copy of it if you want it. I'll give you a copy of it.
Do you
You
have,
want it?
sure. Do you have any emotions right now? Do you feel
Any what?
any specific emotions that you feel right now talking about all these memories?
Well, at my age now, it's not so much my emotions. It's the fact is that I'm pushing 100 years of age, and I say to myself, "How in God's name did you ever get through this far?" That was my emotions. That was my emotion.
Thank you for sharing with me.
You're very welcome.
That's it.
That's about it.
Okay.
You want a copy of that